I knew the exact moment my career at Corivia was dead. It wasn't when the HR rep with the dead eyes handed me a cardboard box, and it wasn't when security escorted me out like I was a rogue agent with a backpack full of plutonium. No, the rot set in 6 months earlier, the second Alex Carrington walked through the frosted glass doors wearing a vest that cost more than my first car and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked like he'd been genetically engineered in a Petri dish labeled series of funding, designed solely to destroy substance with style. I'm Brittany. I don't do TED talks. I don't have a personal brand or a Twitter following that hangs on my every cryptic thought about cryptocurrency. I'm the person in the back room with the noise-canceling headphones, writing the code that actually makes the world turn. I invented the Corivia platform. It wasn't a team effort, despite what our story page on the website claims now. It was 5 years of my life, bled out in lines of Python and agonizing clinical trials. It was a diagnostic engine that could predict rare genetic anomalies with 99.8% accuracy before a patient even showed a symptom. It was elegant. It was precise. And critically, it was mine. Before I ever signed a contract with the company, I did something that makes most corporate lawyers break out in hives. I kept the primary patent. Corivia didn't own the engine, they leased it. Think of it like renting a Ferrari engine to put in a Honda Civic chassis. They could drive it, they could paint it, they could sell tickets to see it, but if they stopped paying the lease, or if they violated the terms, I could reach into the hood and take my engine back. Hey, really quick, if you're into stories about corporate sharks getting gutted by the nerds they underestimated, hit subscribe button and maybe drop a like. It keeps the caffeine flowing and the servers running for the rest of this disaster. Thanks. Carrington didn't know that, or maybe he didn't care to read the fine print. He was the new CEO, brought in to scale us, which is business speak for inflate the value, sell it to the highest bidder, and leave the carcass for the vultures. He swept into the R&D lab that first day, smelling of sandalwood and aggressive optimism, and started touching things. He picked up a prototype sensor, tossed it in the air, and caught it. Brittany, right? He asked, not looking at me. He was looking at the reflection of his teeth in the monitor. I love what you're doing here. Really granular stuff. But we need to think bigger. We need to stop thinking medical device and start thinking lifestyle integration. Detects leukemia, Alex, I said, my voice flat. It's not a Fitbit. He laughed, a sharp, barking sound. That's the scientist brain talking. I need you to activate your founder mindset. We're positioning for a liquidity event. Big players are sniffing around. Intercalix Ventures, you know them? 500 million on the table. But they need a clean narrative. Complexity scares money, Brittany. Complexity saves lives, I shot back. He stopped smiling then. He looked at me with the kind of pity you reserve for a child trying to pay for groceries with Monopoly money. We'll work on your pitch, he said, patting my shoulder. I flinched. We're going to make you a star, Britt. Just trust the process. The process, it turned out, involved erasing me. Slowly at first. My name started disappearing from the slide decks. The weekly R&D updates, which I used to lead, were rescheduled to times I had conflicts with. I'd walk past the conference room and see Carrington in there with the marketing team, gesturing wildly at a whiteboard that had my algorithms drawn on it in wrong colors, explaining my work to people who thought Java was just a type of coffee. It was infuriating, sure, but I wasn't worried about my job yet. I was the golden goose. You don't shoot the goose, right? You just pluck a few feathers to make a pillow for yourself. That's what I told myself as I sat in my office, watching the fog roll in over the bay, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. I told myself to focus on the work. To focus on the patent update I was quietly filing, a continuation that covered the new AI integration. But the atmosphere in the office was shifting. It was getting heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. The junior devs stopped making eye contact with me. The shared calendar suddenly had blocks labeled private strategy that took up half the day. I remember walking into the break room and finding a printed email left on the counter. It was from Carrington to the board. It was face up, right next to the creamer. Legacy personnel are becoming a friction point for the Intercalix deal. We need to streamline the IP narrative. I'm handling the B situation. Expect resolution by Q3. The B situation, that was me. I wasn't the chief technology officer anymore. I was a friction point. I was a smudge on the lens of his perfect $500 million vision. I picked up the paper. My hand didn't shake. That's the thing about me, I don't panic, I analyze. I folded the email into a perfect square, sharp creases, tight corners. I put it in my pocket. If Carrington wanted to play games, he should have checked who wrote the rules. He thought he was playing poker. Didn't realize we were playing chess, and I had already moved my queen 5 years ago. But I still didn't know how bad it was going to get. I didn't know that handling the situation meant destroying my reputation before kicking me to the curb. I went back to my desk, unlocked my encrypted drive, and opened the folder labeled License Agreement Final PDF. I stared at Clause 14b, the nuclear option. Try me, Alex. I whispered to the empty room. Just try me. If you've never worked in tech, let me explain the phenomenon of the soft lockout. It's not as dramatic as changing the locks on the door. It's 1,000 tiny cuts designed to bleed your authority dry until you're just a ghost haunting your own cubicle. It started with the Slack channels. One morning I woke up, grabbed my phone, and noticed the Hash Leadership Core channel was gone, just vanished. When I messaged the sysadmin, kid named Tyler who I'd personally hired, he took 3 hours to reply. Hey Britt, Alex restructured the comms architecture. Said we needed to streamline decision-making. You're in Hash Research General now, Hash Research General. That was the channel where the interns posted memes about caffeine and asked where the extra HDMI cables were. I had been demoted from the cockpit to the cargo hold without a single meeting. I walked into the office that day, and the silence was deafening. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking? It was that, but constant. It was an ambient frequency of guilt. My team, people I had mentored, people whose wedding invites were on my fridge, would suddenly become fascinatingly absorbed in their screens as I passed. They knew. They all knew something was coming, and survival instinct in Silicon Valley is stronger than loyalty. If the CEO is sharpening the axe, we don't stand next to the tree. Then came the junior analyst incident. Kevin was 22, wore Patagonia vests exclusively, and had the intellectual depth of a puddle in a heat wave. He was Carrington's new pet project, an innovation ninja or some such nonsense title. I was in the communal kitchen, staring at the espresso machine like it might tell me the secrets of the universe when Kevin bounced in. Hey, Brittany. Quick question, he chirped, oblivious to the fact that I was radiating do not disturb energy. I'm scrubbing the metadata on the slide deck for the Intercalyx due diligence team. Alex said to make sure all the IP attributions are clean. I saw your name on the legacy docs, but I can just find and replace that with Corivia Proprietary Holdings, right? Just to keep it consistent? My blood ran cold. Not hot, cold. Liquid nitrogen cold. Kevin, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. Show me the deck. He pulled up his iPad. Yeah, see? Alex put a note here. Assert full corporate ownership. Remove founder liabilities. I looked at the slide. It was a diagram of my neural net architecture, the specific recursive loop that made the whole thing work. And right there in bold Helvetica it said, property of Corivia Inc., wholly owned subsidiary. He wasn't just erasing me from the history books. He was legally claiming he owned the land my house was built on. Under the terms of our license, Corivia had exclusive usage rights, not ownership. Claiming ownership to a third party like Intercalyx wasn't just a lie, it was a material breach of contract. It was fraud. Interesting, I said. Kevin, could you email that to me? I just want to double-check the formatting. Sure thing, he said, tapping away. You're the best, Britt, poor Kevin. He had no idea he just handed me the ammunition to execute his boss. I went back to my desk and waited for the ping. There it was. Intercalyx Pitch V4 Final PPTX. I didn't scream. I didn't storm into Carrington's office and flip his standing desk. I opened my personal email, never use corporate email for the kill shot, folks, and forwarded the file to my lawyer, a woman named Sarah who makes great white sharks look like goldfish. My message was 3 words, timestamp this breach. Sarah replied in 2 minutes, received. Clause 7 violation confirmed, are we pulling the trigger? I stared at the blinking cursor. Not yet. If I pulled the license now, the deal would collapse and Carrington would spin it as me being a difficult woman who sabotaged the company out of spite. I needed him to commit. I needed him to stand in front of the world and lie so boldly that there was no walking it back. I needed the humiliation to be absolute. I typed back, wait, let him dig the grave deeper. The next few days were a blur of surreality. I sat in meetings where they discussed the future of the product without asking the person who built it. I watched Carrington strut around the office, high on the fumes of a $500 million deal. He bought a gong, a literal brass gong. Every time they cleared a hurdle with the due diligence team, he'd bang it. Gong. Legal review complete. Gong. Financial audit passed. Every bang was a nail in his coffin. He was so confident. He thought I was just a nerd he could bully into silence. He thought my silence was submission. He didn't understand that for an engineer, silence isn't empty. Silence is processing power. Silence is the system compiling the code before the execution command runs. He called me into his office late on a Thursday. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the glass walls. Didn't offer me a seat. Brittany, he said, leaning back in his air-owned chair, fingers steeped like a villain in a bad movie. We need to talk about the transition. Transition? I asked, playing dumb. The deal is closing next week, he said. Intercalyx wants a fresh start. And frankly, your salary is heavy. We're going to need you to sign a release, a graceful exit. We'll give you 3 months severance and you sign over any residual IP claims, just to tidy up the paperwork. And if I don't, he smiled that shark smile again, then we terminate for cause. Insubordination, failure to adapt. We'll bury you in legal fees until you're selling that patent of yours for scrap metal. He was threatening to fire me. He was threatening to fire the patent holder. It was so stupid I almost laughed. I'll think about it, I said. You have until the all-hands meeting tomorrow, he said. Don't make this ugly, Brittany. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. I walked out of his office. I didn't go home. I went to the server room, the hum of the cooling fans wrapping around me like a blanket. I sat there for hours just watching the lights blink. Green, 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 everything was working perfectly. Tomorrow, the lights were going to go red. The main conference room at Corivia was affectionately known as the Fishbowl. It was a glass-walled monstrosity in the center of the open plan office, designed to promote transparency, but actually serving as a theater for public anxiety. If you were getting yelled at in the fishbowl, everyone saw it. If you were crying in the fishbowl, everyone saw it. Today, the entire company was crammed in there, or hovering around the edges outside the glass, for the strategic alignment all hands. Alex Carrington stood at the head of the table, flanked by the board of directors who had flown in for the pre-acquisition celebration. It looked like a row of vultures in Italian suits picking at the catered croissants. Carrington was practically vibrating. He had the energy of a man who believes he is about to become a god. I stood in the back, leaning against the wall. I wore my usual lab armor, dark jeans, a black blazer, boots. I wasn't dressed for a funeral, but I was definitely dressed for demolition. Team, Carrington started, his voice projecting without a microphone. We stand on the precipice of history. Intercalix Ventures has recognized what I've been telling you for 6 months. Corivia is not just a company. It is a paradigm shift. A few people clapped, mostly the marketing team. My engineers looked at their shoes. They knew the tech was solid, but they also knew the paradigm shift was mostly smoke and mirrors built on top of my hard work. To get here, Carrington continued, pacing the room. We had to make tough choices. We had to trim the fat. We had to pivot from a research-first mindset to a growth-first mindset. He stopped pacing and turned his body slowly, deliberately, until he was facing me. The room went silent. The air got sucked out of the fishbowl. Brittany, he said. He didn't use my last name, just Brittany, like a disappointed father. You've been with us since the beginning. You wrote the original code. And for that, we thank you. He paused for effect. This was it, the performance. But he said, his voice dropping to a theatrical hush, what got us here won't get us there. We need visionaries, not just technicians. We need people who understand that a patent is worthless if it doesn't sell. You've been resistant. You've held onto the old ways. You think like a scientist in a laboratory, not a businesswoman in the arena. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. A stone mask. Let him talk, I thought. Let him put it all on the record. I offered you a generous transition package, Carrington said, lying through his teeth in front of 50 people. You refused. You threatened to hold the company hostage over technicalities. Murmurs rippled through the room. He was painting me as the villain, the greedy founder standing in the way of everyone's payday. So, he said, straightening his cuffs. Effective immediately, Brittany, your employment is terminated. For cause. Security will escort you out. He gestured to the door. Our 2 beefy security guards were already waiting. It was choreographed. He wanted this visual, the old guard being physically removed to make way for the new. I looked at the board. They were watching me with bored indifference. They didn't care who built the engine as long as the car sold. I looked at my team. Kevin, the innovation ninja, looked like he was going to vomit. Tyler, the sysadmin, gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. I pushed off the wall. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't launch into a monologue about how I invented the very air they were breathing. You're making a mistake, Alex, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of that room, it carried like a gunshot. The only mistake, he sneered, was thinking we needed you this long. Your patent is company property, Brittany. Read your contract. Now get out. Read your contract. The irony was so rich it tasted like truffles. I picked up my bag. I walked past the table of vultures. I walked past Carrington, who was already turning back to the room, dismissing me like a gnat. I felt the eyes of every person in that room on my back. They expected me to fight. They expected a scene. Instead, I walked to the door. The security guard reached for my arm. I sidestepped him. I know the way, I said. I walked out of the fishbowl, through the open office, past the rows of desks where I had spent 5 years debugging, optimizing, and stressing. I walked to the elevators. As the doors closed, I saw Carrington raising a glass of champagne, laughing at something a board member said. He thought the game was over. He thought he had won. I pulled out my phone as the elevator descended. I opened the encrypted chat with Sarah. Brittany, he did it, public termination, for cause, and he explicitly claimed the patent is company property in front of the board. Sarah, he's dead. Brittany, execute the revocation. The 24-hour clock starts now. I walked out of the building and into the blinding California sun. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and eucalyptus. It smelled like freedom. I had 24 hours to wait. Then the world would burn. There is a specific kind of silence that follows a detonation. It's the sound of the shockwave traveling before the debris hits the ground. That was my life for the next 24 hours. I went home to my apartment in the Marina District. It's a clean space, minimalist, lots of white oak and slate, with a server rack in the closet that hums like a sleeping cat. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check LinkedIn to see the inevitable spin Carrington's PR team was putting out. Corivia streamlines leadership for next-gen growth. I could write the headline in my sleep. Instead, I made tea. I sat on my balcony watching the fog roll over the Golden Gate Bridge, and I visualized the email that was currently sitting in the inbox of Corivia's general counsel. Sarah had sent it at exactly 11:03 a.m. Subject: Notice of License Revocation, Immediate Action Required to General Counsel, Corivia Inc. CC. Board of Directors per Clause 14B of the Master License Agreement dated 5 years ago. Licensor, Brittany last name, hereby exercises the right to revoke all usage rights to patent hash US 99482B, the Corivia platform, due to material breach of contract, Section 7. False claims of ownership and termination of the founder without cause, Section 12. Founder protections. This revocation is effective 24 hours from receipt of this notice. At 11:03 a.m. tomorrow, Corivia Inc. must cease all operations utilizing the licensed technology or face immediate litigation for patent infringement. It was a kill switch. A legal EMP. Carrington wouldn't see it, not immediately. He was too busy drinking expensive scotch and high-fiving the investors. The general counsel, a man named Marcus who was perpetually overwhelmed, probably flagged it as urgent but wouldn't interrupt the party. They would assume it was a bluff. Desperate negotiation tactic from a disgruntled ex-employee. I poured a glass of wine, a nice Pinot. I watched the sun go down. Around 4 p.m. my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tyler, the sysadmin. Tyler, vibes are weird here. Marcus from legal just ran into Alex's office looking like he saw a ghost. Alex is yelling, "You good?" I smiled. The shockwave had arrived. Brittany, I'm great, Ty. Just doing some gardening. Keep your head down. By 6 p.m. the first call came. It wasn't Carrington. He was too proud. It was Marcus. Brittany, his voice was tight, strained. We received a concerning document from your counsel. Hello, Marcus, I said, sipping my wine. I assume you mean the revocation notice. Look, let's not be rash, he said, trying for a conciliatory tone but sounding panicked. Alex was heated today. The termination, we can classify it as a layoff. We can boost the severance. Pulling the license? That's nuclear. You're destroying the company's value. The company has no value without my IP, Marcus. Alex made that clear today when he said my patent was company property. Since he seems confused about who owns what, I'm just clarifying the situation. Brittany, be reasonable. Intercolix is signing the deal on Monday. If this cloud is hanging over the IP, they'll walk. That sounds like an Alex problem, not a Brittany problem. I said you have 17 hours left. I hung up. I blocked Marcus's number. Then I saw Carrington's name flash on the screen. Alex Carrington. I let it ring. Once, twice. Then I sent it to voicemail. He called again and again. 11 times in 20 minutes. I imagined him in his office, tie loosened, sweat beading on his forehead, staring at the phone. He was used to people folding. He was used to throwing money at problems until they went away. But he couldn't buy me. I didn't need his money. I had my patents, I had my dignity, and I had the absolute certainty that I was right. I ordered Thai food. I watched a documentary about deep-sea jellyfish. I slept like a baby. The next morning, I woke up at 7 a.m., 4 hours until the deadline. My phone was a graveyard of missed calls and frantic texts. Alex, pick up the phone. Alex, we need to talk. Alex, you're being childish. Alex, I'll sue you for tortious interference. Alex, Brittany, please, let's work this out. The desperation was delicious. It had a texture, gritty like sand, but I wasn't waiting for Alex. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was waiting for Intercolix. Because right about now, Sarah was sending a courtesy copy of the revocation notice to the buyer's legal team, just as part of standard due diligence disclosures. The bomb wasn't just under Corivia's chair. It was under the entire deal. At 9:30 a.m., the phone rang. Unknown number. Palo Alto area code. This is Brittany, Miss Brittany, a cool, unfamiliar voice said. This is David Sterling, lead counsel for Intercolix Ventures. We just received a document regarding the IP status of the Corivia platform. Do you have a moment? I smiled. For you, David, I have all day. David Sterling sounded exactly like a man who bills $1,200 an hour. His voice was smooth, devoid of emotion, and sharp as a scalpel. He wasn't interested in the drama, he was interested in the asset. Let me understand the timeline, Sterling said. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. You hold the primary utility patent for the diagnostic algorithm. You licensed it to Corivia 5 years ago. Yesterday, the CEO terminated your employment and asserted full ownership of said patent in a recorded meeting? That is correct, I said. He also violated the non-disparagement clause and the founder protection clause. My lawyer has the transcripts from the attendees. I see, Sterling said. There was a long pause, and the license revocation takes effect. In about 90 minutes, I checked my watch. 11:03 a.m. Miss Brittany, Sterling said, and his tone shifted slightly. More respectful now. Intercolix is prepared to deploy $500 million based on the premise that Corivia owns or has an irrevocable perpetual license to this technology. If that license is revoked, we are essentially buying a very expensive office lease and some Herman Miller chairs. I'm aware, I said. I built the tech, David. Without the algorithm, the machine is just a box of sensors that beeps randomly. Why wasn't this disclosed in the initial data room? He asked. Because Alex Carrington believes that if he ignores a contract hard enough, it stops existing, I said. He bet that I wouldn't blow up the deal because I have equity. He forgot that I care more about the integrity of my invention than I do about his stock price. Understood, Sterling said. Thank you for your candor. I need to make some calls. He hung up. I poured myself a second cup of coffee. The wait was almost over. Meanwhile, over at Corivia HQ, the situation had apparently devolved into Lord of the Flies, but with more Patagonia vests. Tyler was live texting me updates from the server room, which was the only safe zone left. Tyler, Alex is screaming at Marcus, like veins popping screaming. They're trying to find a loophole in the contract. Tyler, now he's calling the board. He's blaming you, says you're emotionally unstable and sabotaging the company. Tyler, dude, the Intercolix auditors just walked in. It looked pissed, I could picture it perfectly. The Intercolix team, suits, briefcases, dead eyes, marching into the glass fishbowl. Carrington trying to put on his charm, flashing that $1,000,000 smile but sweating through his shirt. My phone rang again. It was Carrington. I answered this time. I wanted to hear it. Brittany, he sounded breathless. Thank God. Look, I've been talking to the board. We can fix this. We can, it's over, Alex, I said. It's not over. You're going to ruin everything. Do you have any idea how much money is on the table? For you too, your equity, my equity in a company that stole my work? I don't care, I didn't steal it, I was positioning it. It's marketing, Brittany. You don't understand business. And you don't understand intellectual property law, I said calmly. You fired the patent holder, Alex. You claimed you owned my brain. You breached the license. The revocation is automatic. It's not a negotiation. I'll reinstate you, he shouted. Right now, you're rehired. CTO, whatever you want, just call Sterling and tell him the license is valid. I don't want to work for you, Alex. I never want to see your face again. You vindictive bee, I hung up. 10:55 a.m. 8 minutes left. I opened my laptop and logged into the backend of the Corivia system. I still had my remote access keys. Tyler hadn't revoked them yet, bless him. I didn't do anything malicious. I didn't delete data. I didn't plant a virus. I just watched the license server status. Status, active, license holder, Corivia Inc., expiry, indefinite pending renewal. I had the command line open in another window. My lawyer, Sarah, had already filed the formal paperwork with the USPTO and served Marcus electronically. The legal reality was already shifting. Now, I just had to wait for the business reality to catch up. 11:03 a.m. I took a sip of coffee. The phone didn't ring. The world didn't end. But miles away, in a boardroom that smelled of fear and stale croissants, the ground had just opened up. I imagined David Sterling walking into that room, placing his phone on the table, and looking at Alex Carrington. Mr. Carrington, he would say, we have a problem. I wasn't in the room when the guillotine dropped. Thanks to the deposition transcripts and Tyler's eyewitness account, he was fixing the projector in the corner. I can replay it in 4K resolution. It was 11:15 a.m. The entire board was seated. Carrington was at the head of the table, trying to project confidence, but his eyes were darting around like a trapped animal. The Intercolix team sat on the opposite side. David Sterling, the man with the cool voice, stood up. He didn't open a folder. He didn't pull up a slide deck. He just held a single piece of paper. Gentlemen, Sterling said, ladies, we are pausing the acquisition process effective immediately. The room erupted. Pausing, one of the board members, a venture capitalist named Roger who wore loafers without socks, sputtered. We're at the signing stage. The funds are in escrow. The funds are frozen, Sterling said. We have received confirmation from the primary patent holder, Brittany last name, that the license agreement for the Corivia platform has been revoked due to material breach. Carrington slammed his hand on the table. She's bluffing. It's a negotiation tactic. The company owns the IP, I told you this. Sterling turned to Carrington. He looked at him with the clinical detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. Mr. Carrington, Sterling said, we have reviewed the original master license agreement. Specifically, Clause 12, the founder protection provision. It states clearly that if the licensor is terminated without cause, or if the licensee asserts ownership rights in contradiction to the agreement, the license is voidable with 24 hours notice. He slid the paper across the table. It was the email Sarah had sent yesterday. The notice was served 24 hours ago. The license is dead. As of 11:03 a.m. today, Corivia Inc. is operating an unlicensed medical device. Every scan you run is patent infringement. You are selling a stolen car. The board turned to look at Carrington. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Alex, Roger said, his voice low and dangerous. Did you fire the patent holder? I streamlined the department, Carrington stammered. She was difficult. She wasn't a team player. I didn't think she would actually. You didn't think. Roger cut him off. You told us the IP was secure. You told us the founder was on board with the transition. She's just one engineer, Carrington yelled, losing his composure completely. We have a whole team. We have the code. We have the code, Sterling corrected, but we don't have the right to use it. And according to our technical due diligence, which we rushed this morning, the system requires a cryptographic handshake from the patent holder's private key to install updates, which you no longer have access to. That was the kicker. Little detail I hadn't mentioned to Carrington. The system wasn't just legally protected, it was technically tethered to me. So Sterling continued, buttoning his jacket. Unless you can get Miss Brittany back in this room, apologize and reinstate the license. This company is worth zero, actually less than zero. You're looking at lawsuits from patients, investors, and us. Carrington looked at his phone. He looked at the board. He looked at the door. I can fix this, he whispered. You can't fix anything, Roger said. He stood up. Get out. Excuse me, you're done, Alex. The board is convening an emergency session. You are relieved of your duties pending an investigation into gross negligence. Carrington stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The golden boy, the disruptor, the visionary. He had flown too close to the sun, and the sun was holding a patent enforcement order. Tyler told me later that Carrington didn't leave with dignity. He tried to argue. He tried to blame the legacy culture. Security, the same guards he had tried to use on me yesterday, had to escort him out. Meanwhile, I was at home making a sandwich. Turkey and avocado. It tasted like victory. By 2 p.m., the emails started arriving. Not from Alex, he was probably at a bar somewhere, explaining to a bartender how he was the victim of a conspiracy, but from the board. Subject, urgent, reconciliation/Correvia board from Roger VC firm Brittany, hope you are well. There has been a misunderstanding regarding your status at the company. Alex Carrington has been removed from his position. We would like to open a dialogue about reinstating your role and the license agreement. We are prepared to offer a significant retention package, including increased equity and a seat on the board. I read it and laughed, misunderstanding, that's rich. I didn't reply immediately, I let them sweat. I imagined the panic in that office. Intercolix had walked, the deal was dead, the stock options were worthless. The only thing that could save them was me, and they had just publicly humiliated me 24 hours ago. Around 4 p.m., my lawyer Sarah called. They're frantic, she said, sounding delighted. Roger just called me. He offered you the CTO role and a $2 million signing bonus if you reactivate the license by Monday. What did you tell him? I told him you were considering your options and that you were concerned about the company's culture. Perfect, I said. Brittany, Sarah's voice turned serious. You know you have them by the throat. What do you actually want? Do you want the money? Because we can get a lot of money. I looked around my apartment. I had enough money. My patents paid well. I didn't do this for the cash. I did it because Correvia was my baby and they had tried to turn it into a monster. I don't want the money, Sarah. I want the tech. What do you mean? I want the IP back. Fully. No license. I want Correvia to dissolve the R&D division and transfer all assets related to my platform back to my holding company. They can keep the brand, the office, the ping-pong tables. But the engine comes home. They'll never agree to that, Sarah said. That bankrupts the company. They're already bankrupt, Sarah. They just don't know it yet. Without the license, they have no product. I'm just offering to haul away the debris. The standoff lasted for 3 days. Correvia's stock private valuation tanked as rumors leaked. The junior engineers, my team, started resigning in droves. Tyler sent me a selfie of himself holding a box of his stuff with the caption, Titanic violin player JPG. Finally, on Tuesday, the board caved. They had no choice. Intercolix had officially pulled the offer. The company was bleeding cash. They needed to liquidate. I agreed to a meeting, not at the office. Our coffee shop in the Mission. Neutral ground. Roger showed up looking 10 years older. He didn't order anything. You win, he said. He slid a folder across the table. Asset transfer agreement. We release all claims to the Correvia platform. You drop the patent infringement suit. We go our separate ways. I opened the folder. It was all there. My code, my data, my life's work returning to me. And Alex, I asked. Alex is facing a shareholder lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, Roger said grimly. He won't be a CEO in this town again. I signed the paper. Pleasure doing business with you, Roger, I said. He looked at me with a mix of fear and respect. You know, he said, Alex told us you were just a scientist. He said you didn't have the stomach for business. Alex confused business with bullying, I said. Science is about consequences, cause and effect. He just forgot that part. Here's the thing they never understood, the detail that makes this whole disaster almost funny in a tragic way. Even if Alex hadn't fired me, even if he had smiled, given me a raise, and kept me in the basement while he sold the company, he still would have failed. About 2 months before the junior analyst incident, I had filed a new patent. See, the Correvia platform relied on a specific machine learning model to interpret the genetic data. But models drift. They degrade over time. To keep the accuracy at 99.8%, the system needed a recalibration every 6 months. I had invented a new method for this recalibration, an automated feedback loop that made the system self-healing. I filed it as a continuation in part to my original patent. It was a separate piece of IP, owned 100% by me, and not covered under the original license agreement with Correvia because it was developed on my own time, on my own servers, using a loophole in my employment contract that excluded personal projects. Correvia's entire valuation was based on the system's high accuracy. But without my new update, which I held the keys to, the accuracy would have dropped to 85% within 6 months. The Intercolix deal would have closed, the system would have degraded, and Intercolix would have sued Corrivia for selling them a lemon. Alex thought he was selling a perpetual motion machine. He was actually selling a wind-up toy, and I was the one holding the key. I sat in my apartment looking at the two documents, the original patent, the continuation. They thought they could extract the value and discard the creator. It's the classic Silicon Valley delusion. They think the IP is a static asset, like a gold mine. You find it, you claim it, you dig it up. But software isn't a gold mine, it's a garden. If you fire the gardener, the weeds take over. If you lock out the architect, the building collapses. I took a sip of my wine. The asset transfer agreement sat on my desk. I had my garden back. I opened my laptop. I had a message from David Sterling, the Intercolix lawyer. Subject, future opportunities. Brittany, it seems the Corrivia deal is dead. However, Intercolix remains interested in the underlying technology. If you ever decide to bring the platform to market under a new entity, give me a call. We prefer founders who read the fine print. I smiled. I wasn't going to call him, not yet. I was going to let the dust settle. I was going to rebrand. I was going to hire Tyler and Kevin and the rest of my team. We were going to build something new, and this time there wouldn't be any suits in the way. I went back to the Corrivia office one last time a week later. I didn't have to, but I wanted to pick up my lucky cactus, and let's be honest, I wanted to see the ruins. The office was a ghost town. Growth mindset posters were peeling off the walls. The gong, Carrington's beloved gong, sat in the corner, silent and ridiculous. I walked past the rows of empty desks. Most of the staff had been let go or had quit. The few who remained looked like survivors of a shipwreck, huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. When they saw me, they didn't look away this time. They nodded. A few smiled. I made my way to the fishbowl. Alex Carrington was there. He wasn't the CEO anymore, but he was transitioning out, which meant he was packing boxes under the supervision of a security guard. He looked terrible. Unshaven, shirt wrinkled, the cocky gleam in his eyes replaced by a dull, glazed shock. He was stuffing a framed photo of himself into a cardboard box. He looked up and saw me standing on the other side of the glass. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The glass wall that he had used to display his power was now just a cage. I could see him mouth something. It might have been "I'm sorry." It might have been "F you." It didn't matter. The sound didn't penetrate the glass. I didn't wave. I didn't flip him off. I just took a sip of my coffee, adjusted my bag on my shoulder, and turned away. I walked out of the building, past the reception desk where the Corrivia logo was already being scraped off the wall. Outside, the California sun was bright and unforgiving. I pulled out my phone. I had a text from Tyler. "Tyler, servers are secure. We're ready to migrate the data to the new instance whenever you say go." I typed back, "Go." I walked to my car, tossing my bag in the passenger seat. I started the engine. It purred, a precise, well-engineered sound. They tried to steal my fire. They forgot that fire burns if you don't know how to hold it. I pulled out into traffic, merging onto the 101. The radio was playing something loud and fast. I turned it up. The patent was safe. The team was safe. And me, I was just getting started. Hey, thanks for listening the whole saga. If you enjoyed watching a tech bro get legally obliterated, hit that upvote. And seriously, read your employment contracts. Cheers. Real power doesn't announce itself, it simply acts with precision. Brittany showed them that underestimating quiet competence comes with a steep, swift price. True authority isn't about yelling or empty titles, it's about holding the absolute keys. Always know your worth and protect it fiercely, because some lessons are only learned the hard way. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story.